Hi, my name's Sina, and welcome to the first ever episode of the Millennial Entrepreneur Podcast, a podcast that discovers the motivations and uncovers the journeys of the most inspirational young entrepreneurs. In this episode, I spoke to the 18-year-old founder of an upcoming app called Veggie Alternatives that has already been featured on the Huffington Post and BBC's The One Show, with the ambition of making the transition to a vegan or vegetarian diet as effortless as possible. In the conversation, we talk about his journey of starting the app at only 14, how he handled rejection, and guidance for any young entrepreneurs listening, showing how you can use being young as an advantage in launching your own business idea. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast because we've got some amazing guests coming up that you do not want to miss. And don't forget to leave a 5-star rating along with a review if you enjoyed. Right, let's go on with the episode. Yeah, just why don't you start off by telling us a bit about yourself and because you're still at school. So how did this whole sort of journey begin?
Yeah, hi, thanks for having me on the podcast. I am still at school, as you said. I first started at 14. It was actually the summer after year 9 had finished. And in school, they've recently taught us, just the very basics of app development using a no-code platform called Thunkable, which is what I still use today. And I thought it was really cool that it wasn't just professionals or, people sat in Silicon Valley that could develop apps. It was anyone, if they had the time and the motivation to teach themselves. So I looked at some tutorials online. I learned a bit from experience, and that's the time the very first not very good version of Veggie Alternatives came about. And I've only kept going from there, essentially.
So you started out at the age of 14, and I'm guessing a lot of people listening to this would probably be thinking when I was 14, I wasn't anywhere, I wasn't developing apps pretty much. So, what drove you at such a young age to start it? What really did you want to, I'm guessing that you were vegan at the time, and yeah, what drove you to do it?
Yeah, I guess the first thing that drove me to do it was boredom, actually, because in year 9 summer, I don't think I had much to do. So I got onto that. But once I learned more about it, I was, as you said, vegan at the time, but I had just gone from vegetarian to vegan. And I was thinking, wow, this is such a big change. And I don't actually really know what to replace my milk with or what to replace my cheese with, those sorts of staples. And so I had the idea of bringing my newfound app knowledge and this difficulty that I'd faced together, and make something that can could hopefully not only help me but a lot of other people. And then I got a lot of positive feedback, which I'm very grateful for. I had some animal friendly charities that were telling me that I should keep going with it. I got a lot of support from my family, some of my friends who would test out the early versions. And that really drove me, because I thought, if people think this is a good idea, why shouldn't I keep going with it? And I'll see how far I can take it.
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, that's really inspirational as well at such a young age. And I guess the first thing I would say is that when you are at such a young age, something like feedback can be very much, taken in the wrong direction as sort of like negativity.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? And I guess how important was that feedback early on for you? And did you ever sort of take it badly, as negativity for your creation, basically?
I guess I did get some negative feedback. I had people who were telling me that it's, why would you develop an app that gives people alternatives to vegan and vegetarian, for vegan and vegetarians, when those people can just go on Google and look for it themselves, or things like that. But I always sort of had faith in the idea, in that I thought it helped me after all. So why can't it help people in similar situations? But there were definitely times, I think, when I took the feedback not in the best way I could have. And I think at a young age, you have to remember that I don't think people are out to get you. They're just trying to help you with your ideas. And I think that's important to remember.
Yeah, definitely a great point. Um, so when you were 14 and you released the app, so what were the kind of like early stages of developing it? So you obviously developed it, and what was the sort of next step after that? How did you go on?
So I developed the app and I released it first on Google Play. I didn't release it on iOS until it's been just over a year now. March last year is when I released it on iOS. So I first released it on Google Play. It wasn't great, but people seemed to like the idea enough. I got a few hundred downloads, I guess. And I thought, okay, so some people want it. Why don't I try and make it even better? And I think one of the most important things I did was I emailed, as I said before, some animal friendly charities. I emailed some journalists, those sorts of people. And that was really helpful because it helped spread the word and it gave me a bit more faith in my idea in that these people were taking me, seriously as you could take a 14-year-old who's trying to do this sort of thing. And that was really helpful. So I just emailed as many people as I could actually. And I've tried to keep up that strategy um, throughout throughout the development and the design of the app is email journalists, email charities, email brands that are featured in the app. Because this is something my dad always used to tell me is the worst thing that someone can say to you is no. But and that's the very worst that can come out of it. And if you're lucky, they'll say yes, you'll get a feature, even if it's just on social media, and that can really raise awareness of what you're doing, which is really, really important in the early stages.
I couldn't agree more, and that's the level of maturity and I guess skill set that I'm really surprised that you have at such a young age, basically, because it's very easy, I feel, to just work in like isolation and solidarity, where you kind of just work on your own, but you don't kind of reach out and email people and try to make contact, basically. So how just so people understand the strength of this, how important was making those contacts, reaching out to those important people, those news outlets, just all of them, make widen your contact space. How important was that for you?
It was massively important, and it's something that I've tried to keep up as much as I can now. And just one example of how great it is to make connections early on is one of the connections I made was with someone at BBC Radio 1 because luckily enough, one of the charities who liked the app passed on my details to BBC Radio 1, a friend they had over there, and I managed to get an interview in the early stages of the app. So that was in 2016. I managed to get an interview on the radio. And then when I released the iOS version last year, I emailed the same person and I said, "Hey, look, I've released it on iOS now. I've come a long way since you last heard from me. Would it be possible to get me on the show again? And I could talk about what I've done." And they said yes, which I was very grateful for. But it just shows that it was 3 years after I'd first made that connection, and it still really helped me to promote the app.
And that's a great example of when networking really helps. That was kind of like a marketing aspect of it. Did you ever reach out to like more experienced? I don't want to use like more experienced because you are pretty experienced at such a young age, but people that have been in the space for a long time. Did you ever reach out for sort of like help and support and for people to look over it, or did you just reach out to the sort of like news outlets?
If I'm honest, I didn't really get much professional advice. I think the best advice I got in the early stages of the app was either from my friends or from my family. Um, those sorts of people, but mainly the emailing was for marketing purposes. And if perhaps some journalist did give me some advice or they said, "Oh, I liked this" or something like that, then I'd keep working on that aspect. But I didn't get any really expert advice on it until maybe even late last year and early this year is when I started trying to get more expert advice on it and see where I can really start taking it forward.
How come you decided to seek out this professional sort of not professional but like more experienced eyes or views on the app now? Why didn't you do it before? Is what I guess a lot of people would ask.
I think the first thing I wanted to do is get it out on iOS and on Google Play, which is something I only managed to do in March of last year. And I thought once that was done, I wanted to start monetizing, and I wanted to know what was holding me back. That I couldn't really see. And I think it's really important to ask for help in those sorts of scenarios, because you can't always see what the negatives are with an app, and sometimes your friends can't, your family can't either. You need to speak to people in the industry. So it had got to that stage where I knew I wanted to take it forward, but I didn't exactly know how, and that's where I needed some help. So I started, I emailed one or two experienced people in the industry, but I also entered a few competitions, one of which the F Factor, obviously, I met you through, another one called Young Startup Talent, which was really helpful to me. And the great thing about those competitions is in both of them, I got a lot of mentoring from people who are quite experienced, and they could help me. And they would say, look, I think this bit is really great, but you really need to work on this. And I think it was great. I think often they were quite blunt with me, and they treated me like like a professional, which I really appreciated, and I think that's really important feedback that I needed.
I think this is something that a lot of young people miss, is that they kind of see starting something like an app, they might see it as, very expensive, or they don't have sort of like the knowledge to do it. Yeah, there's so many schemes out there that actually promote young entrepreneurship, and the F Factor is one of them, and the other one that you mentioned, I actually haven't heard of. There's just so many of them, and I've entered one that was sponsored by O2 as well, and that's something that I would
Yeah,
love to encourage younger people to do, is to say, okay, it is a barrier to sort of starting your own thing, is money and funding, but there are loads of schemes out there that promote young entrepreneurship, and I'd love if more young people took advantage of those. How vital were they to your sort of development as well?
I think they're really important, and I think all it takes is a quick Google search, like young entrepreneur competitions, or if you have a particular industry that you want to get into, the name of the industry, and then young entrepreneur or something like that, because there are tons of results, and I think people are really trying to help and mentor young entrepreneurs at the moment. It's increased in the last few years, definitely, and I think we really have to make the most of the opportunities that we have here. Another one that I did just through school was Young Enterprise, which I'm sure a lot of people listening may have done, because it's quite big and quite promoted throughout schools. But that helps me kind of increase my business knowledge, how to do finances maybe, or something like that, which I wouldn't have really learned elsewhere. So I think these opportunities are really great, because they give you the sort of mentorship that you wouldn't be able to get for free anywhere else. Yeah, I completely agree with you. I really wish more people, even if you just have an idea, or even if you're just starting with an idea and you don't really know what it's really going to be yet, I think just make the most of these schemes, because they can really, really help.
Yeah, definitely, and not even just the schemes, but just take advantage of the fact that you're young. To be a passionate young entrepreneur, if you can reach out to anyone and they're always willing to help, that's the thing. And
Yeah, definitely.
mixing the 2 points we kind of talked about, the one where you said reaching out to people is really helpful, and also the
Yes.
one
Yeah.
about the schemes and the mentorship, using the fact that we're young and using that as an excuse to not start is actually the biggest point to start. I think
Hmm.
you can gain mentorship and contact very quickly just by using the I'm only 18 card.
Yeah.
Because if you were, say, 30 and you're reaching out to, I don't know about the people that you reached out to, but I was reaching out to CEOs of big companies when I was starting out my company, and if I was 30 years old, I don't know if they would have written back to me. That's my point. But the fact that I'm young and we're young is a very good excuse to make these contacts. What do you think about that?
Yeah, no, I think that's definitely true. I think people will definitely give you a lot more attention. And I think actually a lot of the success that I've got from Veggie Alternatives so far is actually because I'm young. People, even if people don't think, oh, this might not be the best app I've ever seen, it was developed by someone who's young, and I think people really take that into consideration. But I completely agree with you. It's definitely a reason to get into entrepreneurship because you have the time now that you may not get any time else in your life. Um, I, for example, still have summer holidays, or I might be in my last one now, but I had summer holidays to spend time working on the app. And when I go off to university in October, I might not really start getting those amounts of time to develop the app. I think, as you said, you only get this time once, and you really got to make the most of it, I think.
So you mentioned time as sort of an advantage of being young because summer holidays and I guess work you can kind of do it and
Sure.
do some stuff on the side, I suppose. What would you say is other big advantages that you've seen for yourself of being a young entrepreneur and being still at school? What sort of other advantages would you say that is kind of on our side when it comes to starting your own business or learning?
I think number one, people are very happy to help you. Even teachers at school would be happy to help. I didn't do this personally, but I think even if you went to a teacher at school, I think they'd just be very happy that you were taking the initiative to do something. So I think even if you show it to a teacher at school, hopefully, if you're lucky enough to have a supportive family like I was, I think that was really great. But you can show it to friends who would be like-minded, and you have quite a large network when you're young, especially at university or a secondary school. You have quite a large network of people with diverse views and diverse wants. So for digital technology, for my example, not many of my friends are vegan or vegetarian, but they might be looking to try new foods, or they might just be curious about what they're eating and they think, okay, maybe I'll go vegan for a week and I'll just try it out. But we have the opportunity now to speak to so many different diverse you know people that can help us, and we might not really have that sort of wealth of network at other points in our life when we're older.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. And something that you'll experience when you do eventually go to university, you'll find out that because you're with a lot of pretty astute people, you're with very clever people at the end, like, yeah, let's be honest, and people in different disciplines as well. So a big thing I kind of found out at university is that people are very willing to work with you on projects. Um, in whatever capacity. So if you've made friends with computer science students, they're very willing to work on your idea for nothing, just for the excitement of it, and that sort of passion. I think
Yeah.
you get that a lot at a young age, and I've experienced it a lot at university, where a lot of people are willing to give you their help just for just for the experience basically. And I've had a lot of messages for my own business where people want to help out in whatever capacity, and yeah, it's very nice to hear. So I think that's something that you'll definitely pick up when you go to university, and especially a university like Cambridge that you're going to go to.
Hopefully, yeah. And even now, I have some friends who are really supportive. The main testing of my app was actually through my friends and my family as well. People are happy to go to events with me. They'll on the day that I released for iOS. I thought this was some of the best support I've ever seen. Was a lot of my friends would just take a screenshot of the app and put it on their social media for me, and that really helped me get a good push at the start. But people are very happy to help. And yeah, I hope that just continues at university.
Yeah, for sure. So you talked about when you finally released on iOS
Yeah,
after, what was it, seven times of trying? So you got successful in the eighth try, correct?
yeah, it was the eighth attempt. Yes.
Yeah. So and then you went out and celebrated, and like your friends would post on their like social medias to download the app finally.
Yeah.
Um, I guess a lot of people will kind of look at that and say, like, how did you go seven times? With failing, how it kind of takes its toll, right? How many times could you take the failure? And I guess something that I've experienced is failure should be very much seen as a positive, and something that you've
Yeah.
talked about extensively, written articles about. So, how important was failure, and how important was it in shaping you as an entrepreneur and also your business?
I think failure was one of the best things that ever happened to me. I think this sounds so weird to say now because it definitely wasn't a fun time when it happened, but I think getting rejected by Apple 7 times was so valuable to me because I learned so many lessons. I think, very naive when I first submitted my app to Apple. It was a first version, it had been tested a few times, everything worked, but it wasn't as good as it could have been. And then Apple rejected it. And I was so shocked because I thought, what? I thought they'd accept it on the first try. So I worked on it again. I added some new features. I sent it off again and they rejected it. And they went on to do that, 6 more times until it was 7 rejections. But I think it was so valuable because it forced me to make my app as good as I possibly could have done because that's the way it in the end got rejected. But I think it also made me a stronger person because I sort of learned to bounce back from failure. And I think for anyone else who's experienced it, I think if you push back from failure or rejection, it reinforces the faith you have in your project because you're proving to yourself that you have self belief, and you're proving to yourself that you're motivated. And I think if you truly believe in a project and you think it's something that could one day help people, then I think you have to stick with it, even if you get rejected. Because getting rejected a few times doesn't mean that your idea is bad. It just means that it's not as good as it could be. I think just take failure as advice, actually. Take the feedback and work on it. Don't think, okay, they rejected me, that means I've got to stop, because it very rarely does.
That's yeah, it's great advice. I definitely agree with you. I think it's a story that a lot of early young entrepreneurs have experienced where they think they're so confident going into something and they face rejection, and it's kind of you go down two different ways. You either sit down and kind of stop what you want to do, or you take the feedback and you kind of move on and develop to the point where you go back and the product is a lot better basically. And
Yeah,
it's good that you saw that you saw the best alternative, basically. And I know a lot of people, especially I think our generation, where I say our generation, you're slightly younger than I am, but they kind of see failure as like a they're kind of scared of it. I think it's fair to say. And what would you say to those people that are just as scared of failure and that's sort of an excuse for them to not start?
I think it's not a bad thing to be scared of failure, but I don't think it should be something that stops you from doing something that you're truly passionate about or something that you truly believe in, because whether you're scared of it or not, it's going to happen eventually. And I think forcing yourself to get used to getting rejected, or getting email responses that say, no, sorry, I don't want to promote this, or I don't think you're right to give a feature in, or something like that. I think it's very important because I mean it's going to happen anyway, and I think it's good to get used to it.
Do you see it as something that's very prevalent, being afraid of failure in sort of our generation, or do you just see it as sort of it's not like a generational thing, it's just a general sort of thing, or have you not really observed that?
I don't know if it's a generational thing. I think it's very common though that people are scared of failure. But the only thing I think is that we shouldn't stop it from getting us to do what we want to do. We're always going to be scared of something when we go into it. When I first started public speaking, for example, I was really nervous, but then I've done it a few times for my app now, and I now really enjoy it. I think you have to expose yourself to what you're afraid of, and that's the only way that you can get over it. So yeah, I think exposing yourself to what you're afraid of, whether it's failure or public speaking, like it was for me, or anything else that it might be for anyone that's listening, I think expose yourself to it because that's the way you learn to confront it.
Yeah, definitely. And so you talk about public speaking being a big thing that you've dealt with on a personal
Mhm.
level. What were kind of like really big challenges, firstly for your business? Yeah, well, just highlight some really big challenges for your business, but also for you personally.
I think one that brings my business and me personally together are getting people to take me seriously in the early stages. I think a lot of people would be like, "Oh, you're a kid, you've made an app, well done, good," but they wouldn't really see it as anything that could ever get anywhere. thankfully my parents took me seriously. When I said I'm going to do this and I want to try and make it as good as it could be. But a lot of people, even at school, people are like, oh, that's not going to get anywhere. You just made an app in your free time. It's a hobby. So I think perhaps the most disheartening thing for me was when people didn't take me seriously. Because it is definitely something for young entrepreneurs that can harm your confidence. Um, Other challenges, I'd say, just I have very limited technical ability. I learn mainly through experience when developing the app. Thankfully, the team at Thunkable, which is the platform I use to develop my app, is very helpful to me. But I think inevitably, if you're doing something technology related, you're going to have issues in the testing or the development or even just making the design, and you just can't find something that looks as nice as you'd like it to. I think that was also something that affected me. But I think perhaps those coupled with the rejection from Apple, perhaps the biggest challenges I've faced when working on Veggie Alternatives.
There's kind of like two things I want to talk about from what you just said. I kind of want to go back to the app specifically, and was the business called Funkable the one that you're working with to develop the app?
Yeah, no, so the platform is called Thunkable. It's essentially a platform where anyone can build an app without having to code. It's a no code platform. There's tutorials and you just make an app.
And I remember speaking to you, and I was kind of taken back about how basically you didn't spend that much money to start the app. So why don't you talk to us about kind of how, like, because it was something like £500, wasn't it, that you started the app?
Yeah, or it was £500 in the first few years was the total that I'd spent. I'm not sure if it's gone much higher than that in total up until now. But I think this is one of the biggest myths about entrepreneurship, that it's going to take a lot of money. It is going to take a lot of time, yes, and you're going to have to be determined, but it's not going to take a lot of money. Um, it's something that I think you can do on a limited budget. If you start wanting to publish an app and you want to promote it, of course, then yes, it's going to take money. But to just get started with an idea, it's completely free. You just need your brain, an idea and a computer, and luckily for most of us, we have one of those at home. But for app development specifically, that's essentially all you need. So I think that's quite a big myth. And then promotion as well. As I said earlier, I email a lot of journalists, and quite a few of those have ended up positively for me. And now I've got some promotion for free essentially. So that's a great way around it. If you have a limited budget and you're a young entrepreneur, I think people are very happy to feature you, because these are the sorts of stories people want to see. I think I got quite lucky in that my industry right now is quite topical, um, but I think that's another way to get around having to spend much money on it. So yeah, I think that's just one of the biggest myths actually, that the entrepreneurship, whatever industry you're in, costs a lot of money.
Yeah, definitely. Just I know a lot of people that are listening to this are probably thinking about going vegan, and I just want to talk about veganism just for a bit.
Sure.
Yeah, I know a lot of people are thinking about going vegan, me included. Like, why do you think I know you're a vegetarian now, but you have been vegan in the past. Why do you think this has become such a big thing now? And do you kind of see it as a big positive, for the world, for your app as well, especially? Yeah, why do you kind of see the future of veganism?
I think veganism is a huge positive. I think veganism is the one thing that could truly change the world in so many positive ways. And luckily for me, as veganism grows, I get more downloads too, I guess. But I think it's become such a big thing for three main reasons. There's the environmental one. We're hearing a lot more about climate change on the news nowadays. Greta Thunberg is a massive, massive figure, and I think it's really great what she's doing. We're hearing so much about the destruction that agricultural farming exacts on the landscape and on Earth and how much water it takes, things like that. And people are becoming really aware of their own impact on the environment. My own sister, for example, she has gone vegan, and I think the environment was one of the main reasons why she did it. The second reason is ethical reasons. That was personally the main reason for me why I went vegan. I stopped because I thought it was a little bit too hard, and I didn't really find the time to do it. But I'd really like to go back to it. But I think a lot of people are becoming more compassionate and realizing actually what goes into their milk being produced or their beef being produced or whatever it is. And the final reason is for health, because there have been numerous studies on the health benefits of turning to a meat-free diet, even just eating less red meat a few days a week, things like that. So I think that's why it's become such a huge thing. And I think in the future it's only going to keep growing. And I think that's really great. I think it's a really great trend, and we just have to keep pushing it, because I think a lot of people who have gone vegan have realized how positive it is for their lives.
So if someone listening right now is thinking about going vegan, they say, okay, Ayush, how can your app help me in, I want to become vegan. How can your app benefit me?
Sure. So, veggie alternatives can help anyone trying to, transition to vegan and vegetarianism in many ways. What it does is it breaks down the foods that you'll need to replace when you go vegan into three easy categories. You've got meat, you've got dairy, and you've got other. In those, there's over 40 different food types. Chicken, cheese, chocolate are just three examples. And within those, you get up to 5 branded alternatives that you can buy in supermarkets, or you can buy through app for that food type. So, say you wanted to replace milk, you go into the dairy section, you click milk, and you'll find a variety of dairy-free milks that you can buy in supermarkets. You've got the different types. You've got oat milk, coconut milk, soy milk, whatever it is. You can also click the link in the app, and you can buy it directly through there. And it just makes the whole process of transitioning a little bit easier. I mean, the tagline that I use is meat free, made easy, but it's not just meat free, it's dairy free, it's whatever you want. Anything you want to replace when going vegan or vegetarian, Veggie Alternatives provides it to you with just a few clicks. I think that's its best feature. It's got everything under one streamlined interface, and you don't really need to use anything else.
Yeah, I downloaded it and I find it really useful in kind of, and it kind of surprised me. A lot of things that you think are not vegan are actually vegan. So something like Oreos,
Yeah,
you wouldn't think that they're vegan, but they actually are. And I think this app kind of opens your eyes to things that they're very easy substitutes. I think people will be surprised about.
yeah, I think people, when thinking about going vegan, one of the main things that puts people off is, oh God, it's going to be so hard. Like my whole life is going to get turned upside down. And hopefully, Veggie Alternatives makes the process a lot easier. And I don't think it does turn your life upside down. You replace the basic ingredients. I think a lot of things stay the same. As you said, there are so many things that people are already eating and they don't realize that it's vegan. You've got Oreos as one example. You've got things like Skittles, which people wouldn't think of. You've got tons of sort of chocolates that you'd find in everyday supermarkets that are vegan. Fox's party rings are vegan, and so when I was interviewed on the One Show, this is one of the main things they brought up. It's a topic that people call accidentally vegan, but whether it's accidentally or not, it's vegan. It's better for the environment. It's better for your health. It's ethically sound. Um, yeah, it's just the better thing to eat, and it's usually quite simple actually.
So where do you see the future of veg alternatives?
So I definitely like to continue working on it. I know that university is going to be strenuous, but I think I'll have the time, hopefully, to put those two parts of my life together and work on the app alongside work as I try to do now. I'd like to significantly increase the amount of products available in the app. I'd like to have a rating system where users can rate the ones that they like the most, and then they can even comment on them. I've got a bit of user interaction currently with the forum, but I'd really like to increase that. And one of the other main things I'd like to do is do a little bit of an overhaul on the user interface, make it a little bit more friendly for users, you know, and make the experience as valuable as it could be to them.
Sounds really good. And I think that that's something that when you start out your business, it kind of like molds as you go along, and you speak to new people and you get new feedback, and it kind of just like molds
Yeah,
into something that's completely different. And I think it's okay for things to not I think it's okay for things to change outside of your kind of what you thought it was going to be, and I think that's fine. I think that's part of the journey
yeah, definitely.
because I think a lot of people start their business and they kind of have a vision in mind where A leads to B leads to C, and that's kind of just like where I want to be. But when you actually go out there and speak to people, the business can completely change, and it can mold into something that's completely different. That's something that I've definitely found.
Yeah,
Have you found that as well?
yeah, definitely. And I think one of the things I was definitely guilty of was going into it with a little bit of a narrow mind. People would tell me things like, "Oh, I think this would work really great in the app," and I would be like, "Oh, yeah, great." And then I'd be thinking to myself, "Actually, that's not where I saw it going, so maybe I won't do that." And then when I actually give it a chance and implement, the feature that they'd suggested, or develop something that they thought I should work on, I think actually, wow, this is really improved the app, or it's done things that I never thought it could do. So I think definitely take all the advice you can get, because even if some of it you're not going to like, most people out there are just trying to help you, I think. And don't just have a mindset that's, okay, I'm going to do this, and as you said, A leads to B leads to C. Instead, I think going with, okay, this is my idea, and I'd like it to do this, and hopefully it can do this, but if it could do other things as well, that would be great. And that's where suggestions from friends, family, experts, whatever, should come in.
Yeah, for sure. And I remember, so a bit ago, you talked about people taking you seriously, and I kind of wanted to circle back to this for a while, but yeah, do you think so? You talked about that's kind of like a hindrance of being young, people not being able to take you seriously as much. Do you think that's been a big sort of obstacle for you, and how have you kind of overcome that?
I don't think it's been a huge obstacle, but it's definitely been tough. It's it's just a little bit annoying when you've put a lot of work into something, and you just sort of sense that people aren't taking you as seriously as they take someone who's maybe 5 or 10 years older than you. But I think
So it's definitely so. Sorry to interrupt. Do you think it's definitely about age?
I think that's one of the well, it's one of the challenges I feel that I've experienced when developing the app. Yeah, is just that people think.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with you.
Yeah, it's just that people think, like, oh, you're 16 or you're 15, or you're whatever, but like, oh, you can't have done anything particularly important or meaningful because you're that age. Like, you won't be able to understand, the intricacies of it. But I don't think you need to even understand. I don't think I know half the things that, a really experienced entrepreneur does, but you can still do it. I don't think there needs to be a specific book you read, or anything. I think you learn with experience with these things, or I have at least. I'm sure courses and books and whatever are great, but I think when I started, I just sort of learned as I went on, and people may have not taken me seriously at the start, but I just pushed through with it. I tried to make myself as professional as I could. Even if it's just email, like looking up how to properly format an email if you're, trying to sound professional, things like that. Try to make myself look as professional as I could, and hopefully, I'm now a lot more professional than I was when I started.
Yeah, I was that was one of my questions. I was going to ask how you kind of overcame the fact that people might not take us as seriously as they would someone slightly older.
Yeah,
And yeah, I think you've definitely. I don't think you need to wait to get older to be taken seriously. I think yeah, you just have to make a few minor changes. Um,
definitely. Yeah,
Maybe the way that you have conversations with people, have that sort of maturity on board, sort of widen your learning through. I mean, yeah, you can do those courses, or you can do them through actually doing things, like you did. And I think those sort of conversations will, yeah, people will take you more seriously.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. It's not something that's easy to deal with. It is very annoying when people don't want to take you seriously, but it's not really there's not really much you can do about it other than just keep going and keep trying to make yourself as professional as you can and keep learning. And I don't think there's ever a point where you can stop learning more about things or stop gaining experience. So I think as long as you keep going, you're going to be fine.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you, and I think, yeah, I think an amazing note to kind of conclude on, for sure. So yeah, thanks for being my first ever guest on the Millennial Entrepreneur podcast.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks for listening to the first ever episode of the Millennial Entrepreneur podcast. Be sure, if you did enjoy, to leave us a 5-star rating along with a review. Share it with your friends if you want, and be sure to check out Ayush's app Veggie Alternatives, as it does make the whole transition extremely easy for aspiring vegetarians or vegans. I've been your host, Sina Sadzadeh. See you in the next episode.